We're talking about how to start an LLC in Minnesota, and what you can see back here is a checklist, a document that we're going to be working through throughout this video and also this video series so that you know everything you need to know about setting up an LLC. The really important part here is in the beginning. It's how to avoid the LLC dumpster fire. So what that is you get your LLC set up, but there's certain things that you're unaware of that you don't realize can create a lot of issues for you down the road. Examples of this are people who don't understand terms such as piercing the corporate veil, registered agents, commingling funds, pass-through taxation, or perhaps they don't understand how the LLC renewal process works, or they don't bother setting up and researching business licenses and permits for their new LLC. Now, to better understand these things, what we're going to do is we're actually going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to talk about what an LLC actually does for your business so that we can then zoom in and then go through a checklist of getting your LLC set up. Why don't we click here and start with understanding exactly what your LLC does for you. An LLC is a limited liability company, so it offers limited liability protection, and it's also a pass-through taxation entity. To best explain this, why don't we go through an example of owning a coffee shop without an LLC. Now, what you can see back here on the screen is this is an individual, a business owner, and everything is attached to them. They have their personal home, personal car, and bank account attached to them, but also all of their business assets, business bank, point of sale, the cafe, going with the coffee shop example, the espresso machine, the lights, all of this. This creates a lot of liability for this individual. Now, we scroll down and we go to owning an LLC that owns the coffee shop. It looks different. Now you have that business owner on the left-hand side attached to his personal assets, but on the right-hand side, we've called it Acme Coffee LLC, and you can see those assets are all underneath that LLC. The important part here is this red division in the middle. That line is called the corporate veil. Now, if you recall, if we go up to the top here, we talked about piercing the corporate veil, and also for this example, we're going to talk about commingling funds. So piercing the corporate veil, this happens when, let's say you're sued, right? Somebody gets hurt in your coffee shop, they hire an attorney, and that attorney's job is to try and get as much money for their client as possible. The way that they can do this is they can try and prove to the judge that there are cracks in your LLC. An example of one would be commingling funds. So this is where you didn't get a business bank account set up right away, and you ran personal and business transactions through your personal bank account. That's commingling funds, and that creates a crack. So if that attorney goes to the judge, gives them the evidence, and the judge agrees with them, they can do something called piercing the corporate veil. When that happens, this division between your personal and business assets dissolves, and then that attorney can come after your business and personal assets. So now we have a good understanding of what an LLC does, but we're starting to see how things such as commingling funds and piercing the corporate veil all weave together in this. And what we're going to do is continue to build on that. What I'd like to do is talk next about explanation of pass-through taxation. Now, this isn't something that necessarily is important today as you're setting your LLC up, but it's very important when it comes to tax time because some people get a little bit confused on this. Again, going back to Acme Coffee LLC, let's say that it grossed $140,000. It had expenses of $90,000 and a net income of $50,000. That $50,000 is not taxed through the business by the IRS. What happens is this $50,000 passes through. Sometimes this is called flow-through taxation. It could be called flow-through to the business owner, and the IRS is taxing the business owner. Just wanted you to be aware of this so that tax time is a little bit more clear for you when you're getting set up there. Now down here, there is a mention of applying an S-Corp designation to reduce your tax burden. We're going to be talking about that in a future video in this series. And I know it's a little bit of extra work to kind of work through a couple different videos, but I want you to have a solid understanding and base for yourself, not only to get your LLC set up, but to make sure it's done correctly, and then in the future, know what options are available to you so that you can save on taxes down the line when your business starts generating income for you. All right, why don't we go now to the checklist to start your LLC. First thing on here is just to get this checklist for yourself. There's a nice bonus section and a glossary of terms I want to go over really quick. The glossary of terms are down here, and then just in case we breeze past something that you're unfamiliar with, but the bonus section is really cool. And before I get to that, I do want to mention there's a QR code on the screen that you can scan to get this checklist for free, but there's also a link in the description below as well. But why don't we take a look at the AI chatbot here? So I can put in something like how to start an LLC LLC, Minnesota. So this chatbot is creating a custom list of the steps that are needed in your state to develop that LLC. Now, you might be wondering, like, how do I register an EIN? And maybe you're not familiar with what an EIN is right now. We're going to cover that in this video in a few moments. So this is a pretty cool tool that makes it really easy there. The yearly accounting calendar, I would highly suggest getting this and saving it to your phone, harding it. These are all the important deadlines for your LLC. There's a free charitable opportunity where you can donate $20 when you get your LLC set up. And then we're going to be talking about future tax savings and free CPA advice in future videos as well. All right, so next steps, decide on which route you want to go. Do you want to go state site, the online LLC services, or an attorney? The state website is going to be the hardest to use because it's a state website, but there's also the least amount of upsells. You'll just be asked if you wanted expedited processing. When you go through online legal tools that are popularized, a lot of them actually have a 0+ state fee package that it starts at, but there are a lot of upsells. The pros to that is you can get things like your website, your email, even payment processing, all of these things handled for you in one place, but they are going to be pretty aggressive in trying to upsell you into these packages. Now, the third route is if you have a more complex situation or perhaps a lot of potential liability, you may want to talk to an attorney who can dial in your LLC, and they can also work with you to set up an operating agreement, which we're going to talk about in a little bit as well. For the sake of this video, we're going to go through the state route, and in the next video, we're going to deeper dive on all of those for you so you know which one's the correct route for you. But just for example purposes, we're going to use the state. So decide on a business name for your LLC. This is specific to Minnesota too, all right? What you need to do here is you need to make sure that the LLC name that you arrive at is unique within the state database of Minnesota. And we're going to talk about that in a moment, but one thing I want to mention is the name that you come up with isn't always as important as you think. The reason for that is, let's say you have Acme Coffee LLC. Terrible name for a coffee shop. But if you decide to name your coffee shop something like Espresso Yourself Cafe, what you can do is you can create a fictitious name, and it's sometimes referred to as a DBA, doing business as name, and that exists within the LLC, and that is the brand name that people recognize. Nobody will know, Acme Coffee LLC. It's just what's on your entity. So just don't feel like there's a ton of pressure to come up with the perfect LLC name. You do want a great brand name, but the LLC name is not quite as important as long as you have it unique. Now, what we have here is a state directory list. And we're going to go on here, we're going to scroll down to Minnesota. And then here, you're going to put in your business name. Now, if I made it the Gophers, obviously, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to pop up when we do Gophers. Here you're going to just see a sprawling list of Gopher-related names. But if I just kind of jam out on the keyboard like this and click search, what you're going to see is a result that you're actually looking for your LLC. And you can see down here in the yellow, it says no results match the criteria entered. So whatever LLC name you come up with, when you search the database, that is what you want to see. Now let's assume that you've come up with your LLC name and you're ready to get started. So now we can form your LLC. What we're going to cover is actually the first three boxes right now, which is registering your LLC name, writing your articles of organization, and we're also going to get to assigning a registered agent. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference between registering an LLC name and filing the Articles of Organization? The Articles of Organization are the official documents that you file with the Secretary of State to set up your LLC formally. When you register an LLC name, it's just taking the actual name and earmarking it, registering it with the state. The best example I could give is if you're starting a website and you don't have the time and resources to build the website today, but you take that first step of registering the domain name. It's the same thing when you're registering your LLC name. Most people will do all these steps at one time, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. There's a state directory here that you can click next to writing your Articles of Organization. These bullet points will cover a lot of the details of what's in the Articles of Organization, but what we're going to do is we're going to work through the one that's specific to Minnesota here, and I just want to cover a few aspects of this. So Minnesota does it a little bit differently, and their filing fee that you pay to the Secretary of State is $135 if you do it by mail, and it's $155 for expedited service in person or online. Most people, for the extra $20, will do it through the convenience of doing it online, but really that's your call. But there's no way around these fees. If you go through the state website, through an online legal tool, a business attorney, you're going to pay that filing fee. The state wants their money. But what we're going to do in section 1 here, article 1, is you're going to put in that LLC name that you've created. Article 2 is asking about the registered office address and agent. All right, what does that mean? Well, as you remember, that was one of the items on our checklist here. So why don't we head back here and click registered agents, because I want to talk about that right now. What a registered agent is a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. Now, going back to the coffee shop, let's say that you're being sued. What's going to happen is the attorney suing you is going to submit a service of process notice. What that basically is saying is that here's when you need to show up to court, where you're being sued, etc. The registered agent is going to be the person that's going to handle that documentation, make sure that you get that, and make sure that you have the proper documents that you need when you're showing up to court. The registered agent, there's a few rules around it. You have to have one. They have to have a physical mailing address in the state of Minnesota, and it cannot be a P.O. box. That's what you need to know. Now, there are professional services out there. A lot of the online legal tools will provide this to you for an additional fee. One of them in particular that we're going to talk about in the next video, they actually provide this to you for free for the first year as well. When you're going through the state website, though, they don't give you the best information on this all the time, so that's why we're doing that right now. But then what I want to look at is the organizers. So if it's just you, a single member LLC, you're going to be the organizer, signature, name, and date, email addresses, listed names for phones. And then what they do in this section is it's just a snapshot of your business, getting some details. Is this a woman-owned business, or what category is this in? So then once you have this all filled out, if you want to mail it in, the address is on here, right here. You can file it in person or mail to that address, or you can do it online for that extra $20 fee. Now, going back to our checklist here, let's say that you filed the articles of organization, you've submitted your filing fee. What you can look at now is creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. This is not required currently to set up an LLC in the state of Minnesota, but it is a good idea to set one up. What it is it basically highlights who the members of the LLC are, what are their roles and responsibilities, but it can also cover things such as what happens if a member of the LLC needs to exit the company. Now, let's say you have that coffee shop and you had a partner and you end up having 22 locations. It's doing great. And then life changes and that partner says they want out of the business. Well, that's a tough question to figure out what the value is to that person. Now, if you haven't already established this in an operating agreement up front, a lot of times what ends up happening is you have to get attorneys involved, and it can cost tens of thousands of dollars in litigation just because you didn't do the work up front. An LLC operating agreement can best be summed up that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, do you have to have it day one? No, but as you get set up and rolling, it's a good idea to get one set up. The online legal tools a lot of times will provide a boilerplate template that you can use, or if you go through a business attorney, they can really dial one into your specific needs. Next, we're going to talk about after LLC formation, setting up an EIN. There's an IRS link here, and what an EIN is an employment identification number that the IRS assigns you. It's very similar to a social security number, which helps identify your business. Now, this is not necessarily required, but if you're going to do things like have people on payroll, you're going to need an EIN. And when you apply for things such as business insurance or an office space or a business bank account, being able to put your EIN on the paperwork is a little bit more professional than your personal social security number. So highly suggest you get this set up right away. It's free to do on the IRS website. Online legal tools will do this for an additional fee as part of their mid-tier packages typically. But just know that that's a good thing to get set up as soon as you get set up with your LLC. Now, this section right here, obtain business licenses and permits for your LLC. As you recall, this was up here. So why don't we click this? And then what I want to mention too is stuff like the LLC renewal process. We're going to be talking about that in the future videos as well in this playlist. Just things that you need to know to make sure that you're maintaining your LLC properly. But with the business licenses and permits, how does this work? Well, basically, let's say that you were opening a brewery. This is a good example. You're brewing beer, you're distributing it, and you're also serving it on location. These three things could potentially require different licenses and permits. And then those can be required on the federal, state, and local level. What you can do is you can actually call your town clerk, your city clerk, and just say, hey, I'm thinking about starting this type of business, and I'm just wondering what kind of licenses and permits that I'm going to need, and is there anything on the county level or the state level that I should be aware of? You can also also go through and start to Google different things because different business categories require different licenses and permits. A dentist and a chiropractor may have different requirements than somebody starting a construction company. But it's really important that you get these set up because you don't want to operate your business without the necessary permits and licenses. Just a quick mention too, some of the online legal tools will do this research on your behalf. It's an additional fee, but if you're nervous about it, it's another reason why you might want to go with an online legal tool as opposed to the state website. Quickly, I want to cover what we're going to talk about in the next video. We're basically going over the different options for LLC formation, deep diving on the state versus online tools versus attorney. What we're going to be looking at is fees associated with setting up your LLC. This is actually an embedded cost calculator that we're going to look at, and it shows you down to the dollar how much it's going to cost not only to start your LLC, but to maintain it for 5 years when it comes to the LLC renewal process. We're going to go over a star rating system of like how we compare these three different services. We're also going to talk about domestic and foreign LLCs. Really important that you understand this, especially as your business grows. And then lastly, we're going to go over questions worth asking. So things such as, are you currently making $40,000 a year of net profit? Maybe you're not today, but we're going to deep dive into questions like this and why it's so important for your business down the road so that you can optimize your tax strategy. And again, you can get this free document for yourself. There's a link in the description below. And what we're going to do is we're going to work through it further in this next video. So I'll catch you in the next video.